Welcome, Mayor.
Thank you. Good evening.
So good to have you here.
Thank you for having us. Ready to start? Or?
Yes.
Okay. Chairwoman Young, Chairman Farrell, members of the Ways and Means Finance Committees, Rochester's Great Assemblyman Gant, and Majority Leader Morelli, and other members of the Senate and Assembly, thank you for this opportunity to address the panel on behalf of the residents of the City of Rochester. I'm joined here today with my Budget Director, Chris Wagner. In our city, we are pressing on with our agenda to bring more jobs, safer streets, and better schools to every corner of Rochester. In order to do this, I'm asking the state to write a requirement that only affects the City of Rochester. So I'm keeping my testimony short and making just one request of the state today: equity in municipal education funding to cities. Specifically, in lieu of AIM increase and to meet our state-mandated maintenance of effort to fund our school district, I'm asking for $30.9 million in municipal education funding as required by state law. This funding will be given to the city and allocated by the city directly to our school district for local educational priorities. Rochester began planning for the 2016 budget with an estimated $41.2 million off funds gap. Through fine-tuning some estimates and making some preliminary decisions, including reductions to needed capital spending, we have narrowed that gap to $28.2 million. This means we will have to make difficult choices when it comes to keeping the lights on and the doors open to important city services. Unlike our sister cities upstate, Rochester does not receive adequate AIM funding to cover our contributions to our schools. In every other upstate city, the state aid exceeds the funding that they are mandated to provide to their schools. Buffalo receives $91 million more in state aid than it is required to give to its school district. Syracuse receives $7.4 million more than it provides to its district. Rochester stands in stark contrast, receiving $30.9 million less in state aid than we are required to give to our school district. The bottom line, the state requires that Rochester gives 69% of its tax levy to its school district. That means that 31% is left for critical city services. And to be frank, it's just not fair. A new funding stream called municipal education funding will enable the city to maintain its commitment to fund the city school district without cutting critical municipal services that the concentration of poverty in our city demands. As you may know, the single biggest barrier of our residents facing poverty among comparatively sized cities, Rochester is second in overall poverty and first in both childhood poverty and extreme poverty. The Rochester Monroe Anti-Poverty Initiative has a goal to reduce poverty by 50% in 15 years. I fully support this goal, and as we work toward it, it will be important not to reduce critical municipal services to this same population. The 2016-17 executive budget includes programs and legislation proposed by the governor that I believe would benefit all of our residents, but particularly our most vulnerable residents. The Clean Water Infrastructure and Pave New York proposals offer much-needed funding for our city's infrastructure. The proposed minimum wage increase in paid family leave would uplift our families and improve access to good jobs. But I will note that in the State of the State address, Governor Cuomo called for an increase in educational funding and plans to address failing schools, saying for generations of New Yorkers, education has been the ladder to climb out of poverty. Today, the need for that ladder is greater than it has ever been, and that's true. Education is a key that unlocks all doors, so I remain committed to working with all of you to provide high-quality educational opportunities to families in every corner of our city. The requested $30.9 million in municipal education funding will come to the city, and we will send it directly to the classrooms and to the school district for their educational priorities. By funding this educational mandate, you would free up much-needed tax dollars that the city can use for the other side of the classroom door. The tax dollars will be used to fund libraries, recreation centers, hard-to-place workers, job training, youth intervention services, and infrastructure that we would need to support police body cameras. I ask that you right this wrong that only affects the taxpayers in the city of Rochester and fully fund our request for municipal education funding. By considering this one request, you have the opportunity to change the lives of 210,000 residents in the city of Rochester. Thank you for agreeing to hear my testimony today, and I look forward to taking any questions that you may have. No questions?
Assembly, any questions?
Thank you very much, Assemblyman Gant.
Thank you very much, Chairman Farrell. Mayor Warren, you talked about the fact that there's a big difference between what you receive from state government and what other cities upstate receive. Can you tell me how that happened, or do you know how that happened?
Mr. Assemblyman, in 2007, the state mandated that cities across the state pay their school district going forward. It's called the maintenance of effort, now $1 less than they were paying at that time. At that time, the city of Rochester was paying our city school district $119.1 million. We have always generously given to our school district, and it was at a time when we had the tax base to do so. But as you know, Kodak and Xerox and Bausch & Lomb is not paying the city the taxes that they used to pay. And so when this was mandated in 2007, Rochester had to continue to pay $119.1 million, even though our tax base has significantly declined. At that point in time, Buffalo was paying their school district, I think, about $87 million or $89 million, and Syracuse about $73. And that mandate that you have with this maintenance of effort, the AIM aid that you provide to those cities actually can be transferred or covers the cost that they have to pay to the school district. For the city of Rochester, the AIM aid we receive does not cover that cost that we have to pay to our school district. And so we're asking for this municipal education funding to cover that increase.
Can you tell me what your cost per student is? Or, no, let me go different. Can you tell me how many students that Rochester had back when the maintenance effort was in place?
I'm sorry?
Can you tell me what the number of students that Rochester had when the maintenance effort was put in place?
I'm sorry, I don't know that number, but I know that with the increase in the number of charter schools, that the significant enrollment in the city school district has declined.
So, but you don't know the total number of students there?
No, I do not know that
My
number.
understanding is at the time that we did the maintenance of effort agreement, of which I was not here when we voted on it, because I thought it was the wrong thing to do then. And I still think it was the wrong thing to do. I believe that it was somewhere around 32,000 students that we had. You have any idea how many students we have today?
No, I think that we have about 26,000 that are enrolled in the city school district, but that does not mean that those students, even though they have a decline in the city school district, many of those students are in other schools like charter schools or private schools.
Yeah, but would you suggest to me that, or suggest to this committee, that maybe we ought to take a look at our cost per student, and even if the student is going to a charter school, in many cases they don't get the same amount of money for the charter student as they do for that student who may be there as in the regular school.
Mr. Assemblyman, I would not advocate for a decrease in the amount of funding I'm not here to advocate a decrease in the amount of funding to our schools. I'm just asking for the state to equal the mandate that they put on the city of Rochester and provide us with the same amount of funding that we have to provide to our school districts as other cities have. When you look at the city of Rochester, and 70% of our tax base is actually going to the school district, whereas other cities that is not necessarily the case, then it creates a problem for our residents and only our residents alone. This is an issue that just impacts the city of Rochester.
I'm not suggesting that we necessarily ought to decrease the amount either. I simply want to go to a different method, possibly, and that's to do it by the cost per student. Because one of the things I quite often hear while heard the past superintendent talk about going out in the community, knocking on doors and getting students to go to class. In many cases, those students are missing from class some 19 days before they're gone after. And I think there are a number of things that we've done wrong, and I'm simply trying to get some way to correct that on behalf of both your administration and or the school district. You talked about Kodak, and you talked about Bosch and Lomb, and you talked about, we can talk about Gleason's. And I remember Arthur Eve saying to me years ago, the problem with you guys, you got too many jobs. And that was back when Buffalo was going through its downturn in the economy. And I'd like to see Arthur now, because I'd like to say the same thing to him. We're not going through that. Kodak at one time had probably 70,000, 80,000 people there in the city of Rochester. Now they got less than 10, as I understand it. So you got an additional problem, plus they've taken down many of those facilities that's out there. So it's important that we understand that you need some major help, that we ought to be giving you. And I think we, as I say, I think we ought to be looking at that, and I ought to turn off my phone. But, so what do you, is there any other ways that we can try and help you?
As I indicated, this would be the one request that we have, is that the state give us the $30.9 million in municipal education funding that would comply with, unless the state changes the rules, the maintenance of effort, that will comply with us being able to provide that money to the school district, and that will free up the money that we need to provide for essential services in our city.
Mm-hmm. And Mrs. Biner talked about the kids that work during the summer, or young people. I assume most of them are young people. Do you have such a program?
Yes, we have the Summer of Opportunity program, where we have about 900 young people that are working not only in the city of Rochester, but also in private companies as well, to get a great experience during those summers, and they are paid a stipend. They're paid a stipend, or not minimum wage? No, they are paid a stipend, and our interns are also paid a stipend, many of them. Our summer interns, college interns. Are those summer programs funded by the state? We have received some money from the state for those programs, and let me ask my budget director, where I believe that we utilize some of our tax dollars for that program as well.
The bulk of the funding comes from the state. While some of our youth workers earn the minimum wage, younger workers get a stipend, and that can be less than minimum wage. Okay. One other question I'd like to ask is, many of us have watched the news and horror over the past few weeks is about Flint, Michigan, and the water supply. I can remember, I've been here long enough to remember that the state gave some money to the city of Rochester and other cities to correct what they call the lead leads. That's the lead pipe that comes off the main and go towards the property. I'd like to know whether or not you know how many of those properties still have lead leads in them. Since we had some of the same problems that Flint has with kids not learning, kids going to jail, and many of those things. And what I'm suggesting and what I think is that these kids may have the same problem that people in Flint may have. I can assure you, Mr. Assemblyman, that the water in Rochester is very safe. Our water has been voted the best water in New York State for many, many years. And you don't think the leads are doing anything to affect our kids? No, we actually have a very good water system in the city of Rochester. It comes from Canadice and Hemlock Lake. It's on a gravity system, so we don't have a pump. We have, we continuously invest in our water system, and we could always use additional dollars to invest in our infrastructure because of some of the old pipes that we have. But as it pertains to the quality of the water, it is the best water in the state of New York. But so you're telling me that we don't have any problems at all with lead in our system? We have So we've actually replaced some of the lead services that you're talking about, going from the,
I agree with you, but those lead services are replaced in the neighborhoods that the poor doesn't live in necessarily.
yeah.
I remember the program.
Yeah, so we would need to look, I could talk to our water department about, how many remain that we would look at.
I'd like to have that.
replacing.
I'd like to have that information because I think there's a correlation between that and kids not learning and kids ending up in the penal institutions of our community.
I actually
I
spoke
think
to...
the state ought to fund that, but I think it ought to be done.
I spoke to our director of Commissioner of DES about this issue, and he indicated to me on Monday that this is not a problem in the city of Rochester.
Okay. I'd still like to have the information.
I definitely will get it for you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chairman.
you, Senator. Assemblyman Morelli.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Your Honor, thank you for being here. First, let me start by thanking you for your partnership on the Monroe Anti-Poverty Initiative. It's been great to work with you on it. I think we're finally making some progress. I want to thank you for your leadership. It's interesting, during the budget, of course, we're all subjected to countless numbers of statistics, and as you can imagine, everyone who appeals to us on a set of metrics that they sort of come up with. But I do think, and I do want to underscore this because I think you've identified it pretty well, the three numbers here that you've suggested that relate to the relationship between the MOE, which was established in 2007 over the objections of a number of us, and the aid to municipalities for the dependent school districts, which Rochester is one, that we're the only city, the only community whose AIM resources are significantly less than our requirement under the MOE. And as Mr. Gant has suggested back in 2007, the city of Rochester, in a sense, depending on your perspective, was penalized because for perpetuity, or at least as long as this law will be in effect, and so far that's been without change, the city of Rochester's obligation to its dependent school district is $119 million. The city of Buffalo, which actually has more students, is a bigger city, only has to contribute $70 million to its school district. At the same time, the city of Buffalo receives $161 million, or as you identify, essentially, if you compare those two numbers, means $90 million. After the city of Buffalo takes in its AIM and pays out under the MOE, they end up with a difference of $90 million to the good. City of Rochester, once it receives its AIM aid, has not only all of its AIM aid going back into its MOE, but has to come up with another $31 million just to meet its obligation under the state law. Yes. So, again, we have metrics all over the place. That's a pretty significant one. And my dear friend Crystal People-Stokes is right here. So I have no objection to the city of Buffalo receiving its funding under AIM or the decision they made relative to what their contribution ought to be to the city school district. But to have a disparity of that size is really unconscionable for the city of Rochester to essentially be held now accountable for not only using all of its AIM money, but then having to come up with another $30 million to meet an obligation that was set, frankly, a penalty because we decided to invest a pretty significant amount of our resources into our young people. So that's good. I think we would probably, and you would probably agree, continue to do that, but obviously whether we did it the way you've suggested or whether through AIM, and I assume this is really a really bad question, I apologize, but it's been a long day, but I wanted to make the point. But I'm assuming if the AIM aid went up, you would have no objection to that. I mean, you're looking for a vehicle in which the amount you receive from the state is at least equal to what your obligation is under the MOE, is that correct?
Yes, but we wanted to present to the state a specific issue that just impacts Rochester, that does not impact any other municipality in upstate New York. And that's the reason why we talked about specifically the educational funding that our municipality has to provide to our school district. But however the state wants to provide the dollars to us, we would appreciate it.
And as I understand it, too, you're not suggesting that you want to be relieved of your obligation under the MOE, that you're prepared to continue to make that contribution to the city school district, but you would like the AIM aid or what other aid package to at least equal that obligation so that we're treated like the other upstate cities where they have actually effectively a surplus.
Yes,
Good. Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you. Senator? Thank you very,
Assemblyman.
oh, excuse me, Assemblyman Aubrey.
Yes, sir. I'm good. How are you, Assemblyman?
And it's just interesting, the conversation you had relative to potential lead in your water and where that is today. So were you indicating, the question was there ever an issue of lead in the water in Syracuse in the past?
And this is Rochester?
I mean, Rochester.
I believe that there was some lead piping that had to be removed and replaced, and the state was able to help us with replacing that lead piping. And what the Assemblyman wants to know is, do we have any additional lead piping that is impacting our water? We have a water filtration system that really cleans the water and is a robust system that we utilize today. And I had a discussion with my DES commissioner about that, and he indicated that we do not have the problems as it pertains to lead that would be a challenge to our community. We have the best tasting water in New York State.
Right. And so at what point in time were you assured that the water was fine? And was there a date certain? They said, we finished this work, it no longer is a problem, and beyond that, it may have been a problem? My point is, it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. You could have had a lead problem in the water. We see that things have happened recently in Flint, where at one point it wasn't, at one point it was, and that the impact on children might go back sometime relative to, what they were receiving in the water system. And without testing or tracking it by time, one might not know whether or not it had that kind of impact relative to learning, because we know that lead in the systems causes that. We see it all over the country. So my question is it...
Do we know this? I cannot give you the exact date when those pipes were changed, and if at that point in time we had a problem with lead in our water. I can tell you that the problem with lead in the city of Rochester has been because of lead paint that was in our homes. And we have been working with our landlords, and we have a lead policy, one of the best policies in the state of New York, that deals with that issue, where we actually go in, and in order to get a certificate of occupancy for renters, they have to actually make sure that the lead is dealt with and the home is lead safe. And we have been, for the number of years, enforcing that at a level that other municipalities have not been. But specifically as it pertains to the water, I would have to get you that information about the date.
And I'm not suggesting that I need to look at it, but I'm only suggesting that there might be, if there are connections that they're worth looking at and knowing, and that they're capable of being found out based on scientific investigation, because if there needs to be remediation for people who have had that kind of impact in their lives, it's also something the state should bear the cost for, all in an attempt to help you resolve the issues that, the city may be facing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Further questions?
Did he?
1 second.
Jeff, for your information, I happen to be a landlord in the city of Rochester. I could tell you do a tremendous job in terms of the lead paint stuff. They really do a great job, and I think that's working. I still have the question in my mind about the lead leads that come into the house, and I'd still like to see whether or not we can get some dollars to double check that one.
I'll
Thank
make
you
sure
very
we
much.
get that information to you as someone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for being here.
Next, the Honorable Mike Spano, Mayor of the City of Yonkers. That's from the song. But I wouldn't say it would be sexist. I love this.
notice, right? Let me say good evening.
You came
Good
in
evening,
first, you came in with us.
Senator Young, Chairwoman Young, Chairman Denny Farrow,
That was your
Leader Stuart Cousins, Assemblywoman Shelley Mayer, Gary Pretlow, my members of the Assembly, to all the friends that are here today. I'm going to actually deviate a little bit because I know that the night has been long for you. And what I'm going to try to do is go up script, give you my 4 priorities, and then be able to open it up for questions. I think that you've heard enough. You probably don't need another scripted speech or leads at this point because there's a lot happening. Let me first start off by saying thank you. Over the last 2 years, I came to you with the Yonkers Board of Education in crisis, a $55 million mistake, and a need for some type of action. And it was under the leadership of our great governor, Andrew Cuomo, working with us, especially under the leadership of our local delegation, where we were able to put in place a 2-year plan that allowed for additional state resources, that allowed for the city to raise some of its own resources, that allowed for the city to embark on a consolidation program between the Board of Education and the City of Yonkers, where we merged 6 different departments within the City of Yonkers, saving the Board of Education close to $10 million, and it has been going very well, and I think could be a model that can be used across the state, but certainly something that we're very happy about. Just to tell you a little bit about what I heard before with the Mayor of Rochester. I like her plan, just so you know. That plan will give us about $115 million in additional aid, so if that works for you guys, you won't have a problem with us. So, but let me just run into a couple of things here. The legislature is actually putting forth, the governor in his proposed budget has put forth additional dollars for education, and that's a good thing. That's going to help us. You know, Yonkers is a school district that still has 16% of its enrollment are children with disabilities. We have 12% of our enrollment are children who have limited English proficiency. We have still been suffering over the years of cuts that took back during the last recession. So as we move forward, we've been trying to restore programs, but we are still at 1 art teacher for every 623 students, 1 music teacher for every 744 students. We have a library ratio, well, you'll like this one, 3,347 to 1, and guidance counselors, 787 to 1. Despite this, the school district had a graduation rate last year of 78%, the highest of the Big 5. That is a testament to the good hard work that the teachers do each and every day. But as you know, it pales into comparison when you look at our neighbors, the neighbors of Scarsdale, Eastchester, and Bronxville, who are graduating at 97, 98, and 99%. So whatever additional aid we can get to our schools to help us, again, continue the journey of restoring music, art, and the different programs that we have started to restore, but not fully, will certainly help us. So again, I say thank you in advance, because I know that this body generally fights for additional aid to education. The partnership, I know I heard a lot of people speak about AIM-AID. AIM-AID is critically important to us, especially in the city of Yonkers. When you look at the fact that our AIM-AID has not been an increase since 2009, it would be actually very good for us to have a 2% cap on that, where we would just get a 2% increase. That would help us out, especially if you look at just in the past 10 years. Health insurance up 51%, workers' compensation up 160%, employee retirement system up 66%, police and fire retirement up 41%. These are very significant numbers, and when you look at what revenues we'll be able to to claim this year under the tax cap, we'll be able to claim about $409,000. So when I came into office, our union contracts were 3 years out. And so we have been solving contracts that are 6 years old. We've gotten most municipal contracts done, but it has cost us about $30 million to do so. And again, we've been able to make it work. We've stayed within the property tax cap for the past 4 years, but it's been very, very difficult. And when you have to cut at the city level, our cuts obviously hurt. Our cuts mean police officers, firefighters, teachers, and so forth and so on. So if there's a push to increase aim aid, I'm all for it, and just would ask that you'll consider that. The other two areas, obviously, our aging infrastructure. It's streets, it's bridges, but it's not just streets and bridges. We have to rebuild a firehouse this year. We have a firehouse that is just completely fallen apart. It's the fire headquarters. We have to rebuild that this year. It's estimated to cost $10 million. But if you look across the city, you look at our firehouses, you look at our precincts, you look at our city pool, you'll see that there's a tremendous amount of need for those infrastructures and for upgrades to those infrastructures. The last big ask I'm going to put forward is going to be to rebuild our schools. This is the one thing I really would like to just talk about a little bit. Yonkers has 39 schools. We have close to 27,000 students in our school district. We are 4,100 students over capacity. We have 4,100 more students than what these 39 schools can hold. Our schools, the average age of a school in Yonkers is 75 years old. We have 2 schools that are over 100 years old. We have, our children are being taught in converted basements and converted gymnasiums. They're being taught in auditoriums where they've taken the section out so they can put a wall up. There are areas of our district where the walls are crumbling, where the roofs are leaking. The city of Yonkers has an immediate need to start to rebuild the schools. You rebuilt Buffalo schools. That was smart. That was the right thing to do. You've started phases 1, and maybe, I'm assuming at least phase 1 in Rochester and Syracuse. That was the right thing to do. The kids need these schools. We are now in a situation where Yonkers needs to rebuild its schools. People will say, but geez, you're in Westchester County. How is it you can't rebuild your own schools? We are in Yonkers at 90% of our constitutional taxing authority. We have, and we all know, we all have, an income tax surcharge, we have a transfer tax, we have an income tax, we have a higher sales tax, we have everything that you might want if you're trying to run the city. But we don't have the deep pockets that are needed to rebuild these schools to put our kids in a proper environment. So what I'm going to be coming to you with this year is legislation. We're going to work with the delegation. We're going to work with the committees that would work on, that would have this, to try and come up with a plan that will allow us to rebuild our schools over the next 13 years in 4 phases. Obviously, it would take a significant push and help from the state. We're going to push for this at the local level and push for additional dollars from the local level as well. But it's not going to be easy. But I think it's the time has come for us to rebuild these schools. This is really the legacy for our kids, and with your help, I anticipate that this will be done. Again, you've been extremely helpful over the years in terms of economic aid, in terms of coming to our rescue when it's been needed. You've been just a great partner. This is the next step. We want to be able to rebuild our schools. Yonkers, as you know, if you watch Show Me a Hero, the HBO special, it talked about desegregation in Yonkers schools. It was a lot to do with the quality of the schools and the fact that there were not enough buildings on the east side of town, and that we still are in this situation where we have old schools, where we have children of color from the west side being bused to schools that are 75 to 100 years old and still not getting what they should or what they need. So that's why I'm asking for your help and support on this, because I really think this is the next step if we want to free Yonkers of those problems. With that, I'll just open up for questions. And again, just thank you.